Hello there, my name is Michael Maynard and welcome back to Gorilla Picking. Now, this is part two. This is part two of looking at the Millenco Magnum, a very interesting lock. Not particularly good lock, okay? Not particularly secure, crap tolerances, you can see how things wheel around in there. But in terms of picking, really good fun and really instructive. So, what we're going to do today, we're going to do a tutorial on specifically how to pick this lock, but in general we're also going to talk about the principles of picking dimple locks and picking locks with sidebars, both of which, as you know, this thing has. So the first thing we've got to talk about really is that we do need slightly different equipment. Now when we are picking normal locks, of course we are going to be using standard picks, and you guys know that I love that thing, that's the Sparrow's Tron. Well, the Sparrow's Tron isn't really a whole lot of use to you in one of these things. You do need a decent dimple pick of some kind. Now I love the Spooks picks and I'm going to be using that to pick this lock, but most of us, let's be honest, tend to buy the cheap Chinese stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay? I mean, this is a cheap Chinese lock. There is no good reason why you can't pick it with a cheap Chinese pick like the Honest Dong Shis, which we all know and love. But here's the thing, guys, they are going to need a little bit of modification if you are going to use one of these picks. Now, I'm not going to go into the very fine details of that today because I can't see the point. But what we are going to do is just talk briefly about the difference between these two picks. The Honest Dong on the right hand side here, you can see looks like a big crude thing, and that's because it is, okay? It's yeah, it's a big ugly looking thing. Now the Spooks pick is far more refined, and it's got a much smaller flag to it, so you can see the head on the Spooks pick there is only about a half or maybe a third roughly the size of the one on the cheap Chinese pick. Now you can make one of these out of one of those, and there are plenty of videos on the net that'll show you how to do that. The best one at the moment is the one done by Andre, so that's Draukan, and I'll link to that below if I can find it. He gives a really good tutorial on how to make a pick, but the bottom line is you can see that that head there is pretty big. Now that head is in fact so wide in this dimension, front to back, that it's wider than the space between two pins, and therefore you can never just pick one pin at a time with this thing, okay? So if you try and get on one pin and move that pin, what you're actually going to do is manipulate that one and the one next door to it. You need a smaller, finer, better quality and better prepared, more subtle pick. Simple as that. What else do you need? Well, you need tension, and there's a couple of different ways to do this. The by far most common tool for picking dimples is the good old Z-bar. So you can see that that is a bog standard Z-bar, and that works tolerably well. But you can see that there's a fair bit of play in there, alright? Now, if you can, you actually want to get in there with something that gives you better control of the core. You'll hear me preach that over and over and over again. Core control is where it is. And what I prefer is a cut down Allen key. So that's an Allen key that I've got and filed down to a taper. You can see that there. And that I can wedge into that keyway. And I have now got no play with the tension wrench whatsoever. If I move that tension wrench, that core moves. It's not like it slops around. So, you know, you can go either way, but that will definitely give you better control than that, and it's the control that you ultimately need. Okay, next thing we want is something to pick the sidebar sliders with. Now, The feedback that you get from sidebar sliders is completely different to normal feedback. What you need to know is the difference between a binding pin, the difference between a set pin, and the difference between a pin in a false gate. Now, in actual fact, a binding pin and a pin in a false gate feel very similar. They're very tightly bound. And for reasons that are a little bit beyond the scope of this video, when a slider is in the true gate of a sidebar, it'll actually have a bit of play, it'll have a bit of slop to it. And that is why everybody uses a thing called the wiggle test or the tap test. You need to be able to just tap that slider just a little bit, tap, 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 and see if it either moves a tiny, tiny bit, in which case it's fine, or whether it is rock solid, in which case it's either binding or it's in a false gate, but either way it needs a click. Now, to do that, you need to use a tool that gives you very, 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 very good feedback. And folks, if there is just one thing that I'd like you to take away from this video, it is that when you're picking sidebars, the feedback that you get through your pick is absolutely crucial. It's more crucial than the feedback that you get through the tension wrench. You need to be able to feel what's going on. You need to know when you tap that pin whether or not it's moving or it's tight. Now, what that means is that you want the most rigid pick you can get in there. Now, the absolute worst thing you can use is a very thin standard pick. So let's say you were using a 15 thousandths Peterson. God knows why you would, but let's say you did. Because that's so fine and so springy, the feedback that you'll get through that is terrible. You can't tell whether that pin is set or not. It is as simple as that. On the other hand, for my money, the absolute best thing you can use is actually a dimple flag. Alright? These things are absolutely rigid, and the feedback you get from that is splendid. But you can't often get a dimple flag in there. So what we are going to use is the thickest standard pick that we can get away with. And the one that I'm going to be using here is my Peterson half diamond. You can see it's a black handle. That means it is 25 thousandths. It's a massive, thick, solid pick. This is the one that I use to pick the sidebar on the MT5 Plus. This is the one that you open the multi-lock with. So trust me when I tell you, if you can open a multi-lock with it and get the feedback that you need from the mighty MT5 Plus, then by God, you're going to be able to get the feedback out of this thing as well. So that's what you need. Decent sidebar pick, decent dimple pick, and decent tension tool of some kind, the tapered one being the best of them. Alright, next thing. How do we actually go about picking the lock? Well, you get it in the vise and you tension it up. You want to tension it up if you can in the most convenient direction for you. Now, when you're picking dimple locks, you will soon find that some locks want to be tensioned clockwise and some locks want to be tensioned anti-clockwise. And if the thing doesn't have a sidebar, you can actually pretty much please yourself. Now, if this thing has a sidebar on the other hand, what you want to do is tension it up so that the sidebar binds last. So you'll probably need 2 or 3 attempts to do this. You might tension it up clockwise for a start. You might pick a few of the standard dimple pins, and then everything goes mushy on you. You don't know what's going on. You have another go and you realise that the sidebar is binding halfway through. So at that point you would then go the other way. You'd pick it the other way around. And hopefully at that point you would find that you could get through all of the standard dimples before the sidebar binds, and that in fact is what we can do with this one. So we'll clamp this up in a sec. Next thing we're going to do is talk about the tension. Now here I differ a little bit from most guys that pick dimples. Now listen folks, because this is pretty important, eh? Most folks pick dimples with only moderate tension and very often light tension. So moderate or even slightly lighter than they would use for the equivalent ordinary pin tumbler lock. Now I'm completely different to that, okay? What works for me is moderate to heavy tension to pick dimples, and the reason for that, I find that dimples are very, very easy to overset, and I find that with medium to high tension it is easier for me to avoid oversetting those pins. So your mileage may vary, alright, but what I would suggest is that when you're learning to pick these things, and particularly the Millenco, you start with medium tension, and if you're not getting great feedback, and if you're struggling to figure out what's going on and you're oversetting pins, you actually increase the tension a little bit rather than decrease it, which is actually what you do in a standard pin tumbler lock. Now the other thing about heavy tension is that it amplifies the feedback that the lock gives you. Now you need to take a next level step here, guys. You need to be thinking about this. The more energy you're putting into that system, in the form of tension, rotational motion, right? The more energy is going to come back out to you in the form of feedback. So if you have got very, 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 very feather light tension on this thing, when you get a pin set, the feedback that you're going to get is very, very, very subtle. You're going to hear maybe a tiny click. You might get a little bit of turn on the core or not much else. On the other hand, if you've got a lot of energy going through this system and you set a pin, you're going to hear a big click, you're going to feel a big turn, you're going to feel something coming back through your flag. So I think my personal view is when you are picking dimples, you want a little bit more tension than you might otherwise use. Then, let's say you've now picked all your dimples and we move on to the sidebar. At that point we have got all dimples picked, so in this case it's 7, and we have got 4 sliders on the sidebar to deal with. Now, like most locking elements, what's then going to happen is that one of those sliders is going to bind, and you just go through methodically and figure out which one it is. So I know sidebars have got a hell of a reputation. I know everybody's scared of the damn things. I know everybody hates the feedback and can't interpret it. But the bottom line is, if you just go through them methodically, and you try the first and it's springy, and the second it's springy, and the third it's springy, and the fourth is hard, then you pick the one that's hard. It really is as simple as that. And you cycle through it. There are no false gates on this thing, so once you get to the point where you've got all 4 of those sliders from bound states of one kind or another to slightly wiggly states, at that point you're going to have the 4 slider elements picked as well, and this lock will be open. So, having got the theory out of the way, let's do the practice. I'm going to mount this up in the vise and we are going to do this thing. Back in a sec. Okay folks, well let's get this thing picked. So what we have got is 7 dimples and 4 sidebar slider elements. The key works as it should, and the first thing we're going to do here is tension this up, and you can see there's a bit of slop there, eh? So you know that I guess suggests that we're not dealing with the best of quality locks. Now what I'd like you to do is pay attention here to this core and look at the amount of turn that I get when I set the very first pin. So 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, 6. Okay, 6 is my binder. Now watch this, 6 is a standard pin. Bang! Did you see the amount of turn that I got there? Now, it's almost dropped into a false set, okay? Now, if you pick one standard pin and your lock gets an amount of turn like that, either one of 2 things happened. Either you have got one standard pin and the rest of the pins in that lock are spools, in which case it's dropped into a massive spool false set. Or what's happening is that you've got a lock with crack tolerances, and just setting one pin gives you a huge turn on the core. Just setting the pin gave us the turn there, guys. Alright, so there's a whole lot more standard pins in there. It's not as if we dropped into a false set. We just got a big, big turn. Okay, what else have we got? Coming back out again, we're stuck on, I think it was pin 2 actually. Let's go back through 1, 2, yeah, 2's binding. Okay, so give 2 a click, graunch. Don't know if I quite got pin 2 set or not. I got a bit of a click out of it, but not much else. Alright, what else we got? 3 a click. Nothing down the back. Okay, back to the front. 1 nothing, 2 nothing, 3 another click, and a little bit of a turn on the core there. 1 nothing, 2 a little click and a turn, 3 nothing, 4 nothing, 5's binding, click, little turn on the core as well. Okay, back out to the start. 1 nothing, 2 nothing, 3 nothing, 4 nothing, 5 nothing, 6 nothing, 7 nothing. Okay, so we're here we go, 5. Right, big click and a turn on 5 again. Now you've seen a couple of pins. There's 4. Click. I've had to click a couple of pins at least twice already. That suggests either tapered drivers or some serrateds, and I think we know that 1 is a serrated pin. What else we got? 1 nothing, 2 nothing, 3's the binder. Click. Another little turn again. Picked a standard pin, got a big turn out of it. 4's binding now. Having trouble getting onto 4. There we go. Okay, a click and another turn. That might actually be the false set we need. You can see that we're in a little bit of a false set there. Either we've got this picked now, so the 7 dimples are picked, or there's maybe only just 1 to go. So I'm just going to run through and see if anything else is yelling at me. 1's not, 2's not, 3's not, 4's not, 5's not, 6's not, 7 not. And you'll notice that we never actually got round to picking that T-pin that was in 7. I think that's a little bit interesting, don't you? Okay, so we're now making the assumption that we are in a false set because we have got a sidebar now binding and 7 dimples picked. So let's now see if we can make some sense out of the sidebar. So the sidebar sliders are along the bottom of the lock. They are pushed this way and they are sprung, which is actually a bit of a dumb thing. It makes it far easier to pick, but they are pushed across to this right hand side of the lock. So I'm going to slide my half diamond down. Okay, yeah, 1 is loose, that's completely springy. 2's springy. 3 is binding a little bit. Okay, give them 3 a little bit of a click. 4, okay, 4 is binding a lot more firmly. And I got a little click out of 4 and a little tiny turn on that core too to tell me I'm on the right track. So I have got definitely 4 in a gate. I think I might have got 3 in a gate as well. Not sure yet about 1 and 2. So what else we got? Going back into the front again. 1. Oh, 1's binding. Okay, alright, so let's sneak that pick in. Click and we're open. Alright. Not a difficult lock, was it, guys? Let's be absolutely blunt. For a lock with 7 plus 4, 11 elements, 4 of which of those are on a sidebar, that wasn't terribly challenging. Now, I'm not going to strip that thing right down, guys. I can't be asked, but you do want to know that I picked all those sidebar elements properly, I'm sure. So we'll just open it up and show you that we do in fact have all the elements in there. I'm not going to do a full strip down because there's no bloody point. Going to get a shim in there because we always shim our locks because we are not idiots. There's our 7 dimple pins. Over on the other side of the lock there's our sidebar with the sidebar in situ, and if I roll it round to the other side here, there we go, you can see that all 4 of those sliders are in position. 1, 2, 3 and 4. So there you go, gents. I am going to call that picked. I'm going to call that a tutorial, and I'm actually pretty pleased with that, guys, because I think what I've done here is taken a lot of the mystery out of picking these things. They're not difficult. Sidebars are not difficult. They are a different set of skills. They're a different set of feedback instructions, if you like, and you need slightly different tools. But once you've learned the tricks, you're fine. So there you go, guys. I'd love to hear what you think about this one. Leave some comments below. My name's Michael Maynard. This is Gorilla Picking, and that is the Millenco Magnum picked.